Okay, here we are, Kinesiology 234, and this presentation is specific to the business of personal training. In a previous presentation, we talked about the actual business models, some of the different types of environments a person might find themselves in when performing personal training. This is more specific towards the business itself, and in a later presentation, there'll be a deeper dive into the analytics of the personal training business. So you look at this and you got to understand, as a personal trainer, your business is driven by the discretionary income of the client. If they don't have extra money to spend, they're certainly not going to spend it on you. You might be able to rationalize a few people into understanding that they have to take care of themselves before they can take care of anybody else, etc. And taking care of themselves will allow them to do work better and take care of the family better. But long story short, if they just don't have the money, they ain't going to pay. And you have to be aware of the actual overall climate or the overall environment. It depends if we're going through a recession. Are we going through a war in Crimea? Are we seeing a case where we're seeing high inflationary pressures like we saw with our CPI, the Consumer Price Index that came out earlier this week? Those are the kind of types of things that, well, frankly, they really put a strain on the customer's wallet and actually kind of subdivide it a little bit and force the customer to make decisions about what they want to spend their money on. So either you got to be really, really, really good and also really persuasive, or you might end up losing some clients. Or another option is you have to be really good about adapting your business to the environment. And by that, I mean you have to be creative in terms of how you work with people and have partner groups and have 3 people come in instead of 2. And as a result, you have these group sessions and you make more money, they pay less money. It's the win-win-win. Those are the things you all want. And you just have to be aware of what's going on around you. Otherwise, to kind of fly through this with your eyes closed, you're going to find yourself losing clients in certain economic climates and not know why. And really, it has nothing to do with you, but it's all about the environment. Now, when you look at scheduling itself will be dictated by the actual culture of the facility you're in. I mean, some facilities are very, very much dictated by an early morning schedule versus evening schedule or vice versa. But usually it's a shoulder hour kind of setup. And by that, I mean you work and trainers work when other people don't. So when somebody's off to their job from 7:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon or whatever their hours may be, we know dang well they're not able to work with a trainer. So as a result, we as trainers tend to work when other people don't. And by the shoulders, we mean early in the morning or later on in the afternoon to evening. And with training, depending where you go, if you go into a smaller facility, maybe it's a studio facility, you can dictate your own pricing, but usually the rates for personal training and therefore how much a person gets paid is going to be dictated by the facility itself. You might have some negotiation in there, but it's not going to be much. So realize when you go in, you might be able to ask for it, but you might not get it. And with the personal training component in a big box facility, oftentimes they have very specific steps they want you to take in terms of how you reach the person, how you contact them, how you know that you've contacted the person, what type of intake did you do with that individual, and then when you're training them, uh, how did you train them, and perhaps you have to document some notes on that as well. And then beyond that, I have to just urge you to be aware of the fact that when you get into one of those larger environments, you're going to have a person who's a personal training director, and they oversee maybe a team of 15 to 20 personal trainers. And as I said in an earlier presentation, you have to get good at networking and building your brand throughout the club. Because if you try to rely on a personal training director to get your training leads, you're going to dry up. So those individuals tend to give the leads to people who are new on the front end. But I've been in environments where there's been favoritism, and you have personal training directors clearly are handing out leads to individuals uh, based on the relationship with them. And I have to admit, there's been times where I have benefited from that just because I've had a good working relationship with my boss. So caveat emptor, right? Buyer beware. Beware of the fact that you have to be good to your boss, but also the other part of it is if you think you're going to rely completely on your personal training director to supply you personal training leads, you're going to dry up. You got to build that network in the facility. Usually the types of services that are presented in a facility will be one-on-one, partner session, and group sessions. And you'll have different setups for this at different locations. Like for example, Centers over at Harper, they have partner sessions, trio, then group session. So you have 3 people, then you have 4 people in a group or more, which has presented some challenges in terms of my clients purchasing one product and they thought it was one thing, but it wasn't. So it was kind of unfortunate for them. But long story short, these are usually the ones that you have. With one-on-one sessions, it's easily the most intimate type of training, right? Because you're one-on-one, you're working with one client and one trainer, that's it. Very easy to manage the session, very easy to manage the schedule, very easy to work with the person and get your hands on them and be able to address things right there in the moment with that person. Usually the cost for these sessions are right around 80 to 85 bucks, and the pay to the trainer on average is roughly about 35 bucks. So you can see how much a club takes for the privilege of providing the trainer equipment and clients. They take 50 bucks per session. This is usually a W-2 employment situation where taxes are taken, unemployment, FICO, et cetera, is all that taken. And many times they'll have like 401ks as well, depending upon the organization, how good they are. When you get into a partner session, you look at this and you have 2 people who are working together. And I have to admit, this is a wonderful situation when you get in a partner and small group, because you have people who hold each other accountable to come in to work out. I don't know if I can make it today, and one of their friends is holding their feet to the fire and say, damn it, you're going in, because if you don't go in, I have to pay for a one-on-one. So they end up both coming in. The other part of it is when they get in and are actually working out together, usually these groups are pretty competitive within their own little culture, right? So you have these different groups of maybe 3 or 4 people who are all pushing each other a little bit more, and it makes life easier. And many times these people can kind of self-coach, which is a great situation. So as you go further and further into adding people to your groups and to your training environment, you just have to understand that the perception is there is a perceived slippage in quality. But if you do it correctly, it's not so much the case. You just have to be able to plan ahead. You can't just show up and wing it. Usually with this, it's about 70% of a one-on-one price. So instead of 85 bucks, they're doing 65 bucks. So the revenue generated is 130 per hour versus 85. Okay, right on. And this is sometimes split 50-50 with the trainer. Other times they'll have a flat rate that they'll offer the trainer for this type of session. But it should be more than what you're making for the one-on-one, wherever you go. If it's 35 bucks in one facility, it better be 36 bucks or better, but it should be actually roughly a 50-50. Now, I did have situations where I've had siblings who I worked with, and the parents had to kind of wrap themselves around the concept of, well, geez, I'm spending 130 bucks for the hour versus 85. It doesn't seem like much of a break. When in actuality, Mrs. Johnson, what you have is, if I train your kids separately for an hour, it ends up being $85. So it comes out to 170 bucks versus 130. So really, no matter how you look at this, you're saving money. And the other part of this is, instead of you having to be here for 2 hours while I train each child one-on-one, you actually can have them work out together for 1 hour, and it saves you an hour, which in everybody's lives, time is valuable and time is like money, So I usually frame it up like that when I talk with clients who push back on that, and they usually can wrap themselves around it. The others that don't really or have trouble with that, I'll have to walk them through the process a little bit further. I did have a situation where I had a mother-daughter who tried to push this as well, and I had to push back on. The mother was insistent on just paying 85 bucks for the 1 hour for she and her daughter. She had been working with another trainer, and when the trainer left, they came to me. And long story short, I mean, the verbiage that was used was, what would you rather have? Would you rather have half of something or all of nothing? And I basically had to say, I'll have all of nothing, because I'm not going to train you at a discount. I'm not going to train your daughter for free. And so you may be confronted with that, where people have to have either some guidance on how this process works, or you're going to have to be able to walk them through it, or you're going to have to walk away. You can't let people just kind of trample on your pocketbook. And when you look at group sessions, usually 3 or more. I mentioned centers as a trio. And this is a little bit different, right? Because now you have a third person in the group, so it takes a little bit more management of the session. You're not so much coaching and cueing, but you're managing the participants and managing the exercise selection and managing the flow of the workout itself. So for example, if you're in a place where it's 85 bucks per hour for one-on-one, you might be down to 50 bucks per person per hour, 3 people, 150 bucks, 75 bucks to the trainer. Not a bad deal. Not a bad deal for the trainer. But the idea is the more people you add, the cheaper it should be for that person and the more the trainer makes. And you'll find some facilities will try to do this. They'll try to do, instead of a 60-minute session, a 45-minute session, for a couple of reasons. They try to change the per minute cost and the overall cost to the participants. But the downside is it also changes the amount of, besides revenue generated, it changes the amount paid to the trainer. So the challenge you have is that you end up going from 60 to 45, and it looks great because you think you're going to generate more business, but really these people will be more than happy to pay this amount. The 15 bucks will not be that big of a deal. And frankly, as a trainer, I can tell you, I don't think I've ever done a 45-minute session in my life. I've always gone over. You know, if I have my clients and they're good to me and I'm good to them, I'm certainly going to take them to 60 minutes. And so I end up actually losing money on that deal. And that's that schedule creep I talked about in another presentation. So, you know, you have two little things you have to look out for with this small group training. And one of which is this: when you have facilities that try to work this 45-minute model versus a 60, because it causes a little bit of schedule creep. Because even if you finish at 45 minutes, sure, you're going to have 15 minutes, you can grab a sandwich, maybe go to the bathroom, etc. But usually you try to be very efficient with your time and go 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. You don't try to go 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, or I'm sorry, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 9:45, 10:45. You know, you always are going to have some downtime in your schedule. And that little 15-minute window there eats into your day. You know, you end up spending 15 minutes here, half an hour there, and you end up having to work 10 hours to get 8 on your schedule. And this is a wonderful example here. If you look at a typical schedule, you have a one-on-one session, a one-on-one session, a partner session, a one-on-one session. Okay, so you got 4 hours, or that might be like 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and then you work the floor for 4 hours, and then you do a group training session and a one-on-one. That's if you go back to back to back to back to back. Usually you'll have these little windows or pockets of time in between your sessions where you don't have back to back to back. And when you first start out, they're going to be all over the place. So I will also urge you, the other thing you have to kind of guard against is not only in terms of the financial creep, if you will, where you have people who want to pay less money. Well, they'll have 2 people come in, they just want to pay for 1 person in the session, etc. But this is another issue. If you come in and train somebody at, say, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then you do a class, and then you do a group, and they take off and go to the Costco, you come back, you train a one-on-one and another one-on-one. Like, this is a wonderful example. 6 o'clock in the morning, all the way down, you're talking, this is a 13-hour day right here. So just be aware of that. And also understand when you train, usually you'll have, in most facilities, it's front-end loaded. Mondays are the busiest day. Tuesdays and Thursdays will kind of fill in. Usually people go Monday and Wednesday, or Monday and Friday, or Monday and Thursday, right? Because they want to have a break in between. And then later on in the week, you're usually done pretty darn early. And on Saturdays, most people come into the facility, and I'll talk about this in another presentation, early in the morning, and they're done by noon. So your schedule will be very front-end loaded on Mondays, and you'll probably have a couple days where you're going to have 13-hour days when it's all said and done, because you're there very early, and you're going to pick up a couple of clients in the evening. So just be aware of that. You know, you may have to, on the front end, kind of set some boundaries. I know there was a point where I was doing 40 hours of personal training in a week, and I had maybe a half an hour downtime here, half an hour downtime there in my schedule. But I can tell you, to do 40 hours, I was at the club for probably 50. And it's a long day, and you just have to be good about managing your schedule and being able to say no to people if you don't want to come in and do a 7 o'clock at night after getting there at 6 a.m. You got to do it. I mean, you got to be able to take care of yourself in this process, because in some regard, you know, you're the beyond being the expert, you are also your own best advertisement, right? So you have to take care of yourself. You have to be able to work out. You have to look like you're there and in the moment and ready, and not look like a truck ran you over because you're so tired from working 13-hour days. So, you know, my cautionary tale regarding schedule creep is maybe set out the hours you actually want to work. And if you have a client that comes to you and they request a time that falls outside of that time window, perhaps you say no and you just move on. At first, when you start your career, you're going to be all over the place. You're going to be picking up clients everywhere. But ultimately, you start to winnow that down a little bit. You might have to hand somebody off to another trainer, offload them to somebody else. And your clients will understand. There's no doubt about it, because the last thing they want is somebody in front of them who just can't perform because they're so exhausted. All right, guys, have yourself a great one. Thank you so much, and be on the lookout for the next presentation.